This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy and Gary Vasilash, episode 569 for September, easy for me to say, September 2nd of 2021, how Nissan decided to redesign the Frontier pickup. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Hello, Gary, out there in virtual land.
John, how are you?
I'm good. Hey, you just got back from a new media launch, right?
Yeah, I was on the Toyota Corolla Cross, their new small crossover, and I can tell you nothing about it. Although I'm very tired because I had a plane that left Austin at 5:25 this morning. So,
yikes!
Here we are.
Yikes! Yeah.
So, on the last show, you were very, very, very good in guessing a car that was introduced by the Ford Motor Company, which was the Edsel. You just nailed it, like boom. Okay.
Yeah, because it was so easy.
All right. So maybe I'm throwing you another softball here. I don't know, but this is a car that was introduced by Henry Ford II on this day. And it was a car that Robert S. McNamara was involved with.
Oh, interesting. So you didn't give me a year. You're going to give me a year?
Oh, I'm sorry. 1959. I'm tired. So.
Oh, really? Well, it's got to be the Ford Falcon.
You got it.
All these Ford ones. So easy. Yeah, interesting. You know, I think there was a guy named Nance. I think it was Jim Nance, who was then president of Ford Motor Company. He's the guy who pushed the Edsel and everything like that. And McNamara wanted him out of the picture, out of the company. And he was the one who really pushed the Falcon. Mm-hmm. And the Falcon went on to some modicum of success. The Edsel failed. And that's why partly why we know who Robert McNamara is today and don't remember that guy Nance.
Don't we remember McNamara because he was the Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War?
Well, I said that was one of the reasons why we remember McNamara.
I was just going to say.
Right, yeah.
I think the notoriety of the other job was a little bit more publicity oriented, but just saying.
Yeah. Hey, we've got Brett Smith from the Center for Automotive Research in Ann Arbor with us today. Hello, Brett.
Hello, John and Gary. How are you two doing today?
We're doing great.
John, 2 in a row. That's good.
Well, he's lobbing up these softballs. If I don't hit them out of the park, I shouldn't be on the show.
Back when you were a young journalist?
Oh, no, that's before my time.
Yeah, come on. That's fairly harsh there, Brett. Yeah. Boy, we can see how this show is going to go.
So, Brett, tell the audience what you do at Center for Automotive Research.
Tell them what you're supposed to do, not what you really do.
Wow, it is going to be harsh. Hey, John, I'm Director of Technology at the Center for Automotive Research. Center for Automotive Research, or CAR, is a not-for-profit research group in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We've been independent for about 22 years now. I started my career with this organization long time ago, back when we were the Office for the Study of Automotive Transportation at the University of Michigan. And over those years, just had a great chance to watch the automotive industry, and it's been a blast to watch, especially the last few years, eh?
Yeah, and we'll get into some of that later in the show too.
So when you were alluding to this storied past that you had, I thought you were going to say that you were at the introduction of the 1959 Falcon.
No, not there.
Okay.
I was there for the Mustang with Standral.
I just wanted to clarify this, Brett.
Yeah, with the Mustang with Standral, but no, not for the Falcon.
Hey, let's bring in our special guest for this segment, Melaina Vasko from Nissan R&D. And let's see, I think I've got your actual title here. Just so you know, Melaina, you are the Vehicle Performance Manager for Nissan tech center, right? USA.
I am. I'm responsible for all trucks and large SUVs. Yes.
Cool. Okay. I'm glad I got that right. So we're here to talk about the Nissan Frontier. And as I've been promoting the show all week, what I've said is, I can't believe they left that truck in the market for 17 years and didn't do much of anything with it. Now you've had a chance to go clean sheet with the truck. So my first question to you is, what did you guys set out to achieve? What did you say, okay, here's what we absolutely have to get right with the new version?
So, like you said, it had been out for 15 years, right? So we had plenty of customer data. We had plenty of competitor data, but we spent a lot of time very early on talking to the customers and making sure that we knew exactly what they wanted in this changing and emerging segment, right? Midsize pickups went away for a while. They came back, and now the segment's moving similar to full-size truck, right? So we wanted to make sure we got it right. We had one shot. We wanted to do it right. Big anticipation. Everyone was waiting. So when we talked to the customers, they really emphasized they wanted us to keep a similar size, right? They didn't want it to get bigger. They didn't want it to encroach in the full size segment. They wanted to be able to put it in their garage. But they also wanted a vehicle that was more comfortable than a traditional pickup truck, full size or mid-size. And with the Honda Ridgeline and the Hyundai Santa Cruz, those are unibody vehicles. So they offer a little bit more comfort. Of course, sacrificing what you get for a pickup truck, but that's kind of what the customer was looking for. We want a truck that can go off-roading, it can tow, it can do what a truck needs to do, but it's comfortable for driving around the city every day, date nights with my wife, carrying my grandkids or kids around. So we strived to we didn't need to reinvent the wheel. What wasn't broken from the previous model and what helped that model continue to sell for 15 years, we wanted to keep. But we wanted to add those refinements in so people clearly recognize the huge improvement that this truck is.
So let me ask you this question about size, okay? So you mentioned that the mid-sized trucks, I mean, many of them went away. You guys stayed there. The Tacoma stayed in the market. And then GM came back with the Colorado and Canyon. And it seemed that there has been this growth of the vehicles dimensionally. And I mean, did you ever look at it from the point of view and saying, okay, is this the right size for a mid-sized truck, or could the mid-sized truck have different dimensions?
Absolutely, we did. We actually clinicked a few different size trucks very early on. We make the Navara in Mexico, which is a slightly smaller truck. And again, what we heard repeatedly is we don't want a mid-size truck that goes bigger, that you can't put in the garage, that's harder to maneuver. The typical buyer for a mid-size truck is, doesn't have kids, whether they're young and not into that stage yet, or whether they're empty nesters. So the rear seat for car seats and for children wasn't as big of a priority as it is to the mid-size segment. But putting it in the garage, if you live in the north, you want to put it in the garage in the winter. That was really important to the customer. And so they felt, from what we heard, the Frontier, the previous generation Frontier, was that right size for them. And I think that you see the full-size trucks have gotten so big that there was this void of, we still want something that's easier to drive around the city and park, but still can, has a bed and can haul things that I need to haul.
Brett, you got a question?
Yeah, so it's funny as you all talk about this. I'm in the market for a mid-sized truck. Just got to say that. So the differences in
make a sale.
Yes, please. We'll let you drive one. It's fantastic.
There we go. That'd be fun. It's interesting as we see these trucks and come out every year, new truck. And Gary or John go to SEMA and the SEMA show, and you think about, okay, when you walk down the floor of the SEMA show, your truck or some of the competitor trucks have some phenomenal SEMA magic performed to them. As you develop this truck, there is so much you can do with these trucks from your engineering point of view. How did you work with internally with your aftermarket folks and externally with the SEMA suppliers in that world of doing the things you like to do, but not getting lost in the other tech and the other options?
So I think you hit on it. Mid-sized trucks are very customizable, and that was something that the outgoing Frontier model lacked, for a better word. There weren't the accessories available that the customers were asking for that maybe you see on Tacoma, or those trucks that you see at SEMA that are built for off-roading or overlanding. So we introduced, I'm going to say around 50 new accessories for this truck. And that development began very early. Our accessories team gets involved very early in the concept phase to make sure the vehicles are packaged to adapt to those accessories. And so they're easy for customers or dealers to install. They're easy to purchase. It's no problem for the customer. And so we started that discussion very early as well, not just with the planning team, but with the engineering team to make sure we got all of those requirements in. Because you're right, that's what the mid-sized customer is looking for, is more customizable.
It's remarkable in the last 15 years, and you point out since this vehicle was redesigned, how much more the truck manufacturers are looking to figure out how to make it accessorizable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why people buy Jeeps, right? You can make the Jeep anything you want.
The Bronco is going to be this year at SEMA show. The Bronco and your vehicle will be superstars with the new and improved excitement that they're putting out there. Yeah. There's so much you can do. That balance of what you all do versus what you let others do, I think, is a really interesting decision.
And we also have that Nismo side, right? So we have the Nismo accessories that have now expanded into the truck segment. So I think you'll see some of that coming at SEMA as well. You'll see some of those Nismo accessories, lift kits, stuff like that, and the opportunities that you have through the Nismo line as well.
Melaina, two questions.
Sure.
One from me, one from one of our viewers. Ron Stafford wants to know, are you ever going to get a manual transmission to go in this truck to compete with the 6-speed manual in the Toyota Tacoma? And then I've got a question too that follows in on that. Off-roading and towing. Man, every automaker seems to be talking about how you can really take these kinds of vehicles off-road. I was on the media launch for the Frontier. You guys had us going up and down very rocky mountains and the like. And then towing too. There's so much emphasis on that. So I guess that's 3 questions. Manual transmission, and tell us about off-roading and towing.
So I'll address manual transmission first. That's less fun for me to talk about. One of the things that we heard from our customers and we saw in the sales is that manual transmissions, while there's a very niche group of people who want them, the large majority of people don't want them. So it really came down to, is it something we want to develop versus something else we can develop, those accessories, or our resources better spent elsewhere? And just honestly, it's a very small volume. And so I would expect the manual transmission trucks to start going away, just because there's not a huge demand for them. And with the increase in emissions and CAFE requirements, I don't see a lot of emphasis being put on manual transmissions.
Okay, off-roading and towing?
So that's one of the best parts about my job, I'll tell you. Hopefully, none of my staff is listening, or my counterparts, I guess. One of the best parts about working on truck is those unique things, right? Those unique requirements, the towing, the off-roading. So we spend a lot of time driving around the country in both our trucks and our competitor trucks to make sure we understand the performance. We spent a lot of time off-roading during the development of this truck, off-roading everything from the previous generation Frontier all the way to, the Colorado ZR2. So those like extreme off-road vehicles. And that was a big focus for us. We understand that comfort on road is the number one priority, but we didn't want to sacrifice comfort or capability off-road for on-road. And that's what you see in our Pro 4X. Our Pro 4X with the Bilstein shocks is really, very well tuned, better than the previous generation for sure. Very tight and very well tuned for that off-road driver. So, and we didn't just stick to one, right? You saw at the drive event, we gave you a lot of rock and dirt, but we expanded it to mud and sand, and we checked the varieties of mud and sand across the country. And again, one of the very fun parts about my job, but we spent a lot of time in Moab, Utah, making sure that, we could cover some of those extreme trails. And then hill climbs in rocks like is showing now. We spent a lot of time developing the off-road performance of this truck, as we did with towing when we added tow mode, right? That's a big addition from the previous generation. So we made sure we spent a lot of time tuning tow mode, not just putting in the new engine and transmission from the 20 model year, but adding that tow mode was a big part of this development as well. And it's great that we get to test all over the country and make sure that this vehicle holds up to the severe mountain grades out west and to the mud that they have down south. So great part of my job.
So I get the part about the towing. I mean, it seems you talk to anybody who has anything to do with the truck and they talk towing. So you guys have a maximum towing capacity of 6,720 pounds. But how many people do off-roading versus how many people basically, drive to Costco?
So you're right. Not many people do actual off-roading with a truck that they buy. And I think we hear that from a lot of customers, but they want to be able to, right? I mean, that's the whole America truck market, right? They want something that they may use once or twice in a specific scene, but they can, right? So they want to be able to put their truck next to their friends, Colorado Z71 or Ranger FX4 and say, look at how that looks. Look at all of the features that I have. Whether they actually go off-roading or not, they want to be able to say, look. And so our styling team in San Diego did a really great job making sure the vehicle looked very capable. But we wanted to make sure for those that do want to go off-roading, even light off-roading, driving to a campsite or a lake to go fishing and you're off pavement, we don't want to lose that stability or that comfort or confidence that you get as soon as you take it off pavement. So there are those customers who do very light off-roading, and that's probably the most common thing they do, right? Not just dirt road to get to your house, but that driving on a 2-track, to get to a campsite. Not a lot of them are going to Moab and climbing those rocks, right? You might see a few at Holly Oaks here in Michigan. But again, I think they're sticking to the less severe because you paid, $30,000 to $40,000 for this truck. You don't want to destroy it, right? Especially if you don't have any expertise in off-roading. So you're right, Gary, not a ton of people actually put it through its paces.
Get that new steering system so they can get in the garage easier.
Yes. Amen.
Brett, you got another?
Yeah, also I was going to say, so far you've hit on the all-important get it in the garage and then showed a great picture of towing a boat, which is checking another one of my boxes. The other box that's important, I think, as we continue to move forward here is fuel economy. And you mentioned some of the challenges of transmissions and fuel economy with the potentially pending Biden administration regs. That really changes the discussion for a small pickup, a mid-sized pickup truck, because often those trucks, from what I see, tend to struggle to meet fuel economy standards. How do you future-proof this? You've come up with a great new product, you've got good fuel economy, you've got great horsepower, but over the next 5, 6, 7 years, okay, even 15 years if you keep it that long, the fuel economy standards are going to change for pickup trucks and get much more stringent. How do you go forward and prepare yourself going forward?
Yeah, I think as a company, Nissan is trying to ensure that we have alternative powertrains under development for all of our vehicles, not just specific to Frontier. So whether that's, downsized turbos or electrification, we're looking at our portfolio as a whole. I think you kind of touched on it. The Biden administration may change the requirements, but in 3 years, if we have a new president, it may change again, right? So we try not to look at it as, well, what if? We try to future proof our entire lineup. What can we do as a whole based on the volume of each model we sell to meet those requirements? And so we're looking at everything, every option possible, downsized turbos, electrification, all of that for all of the Nissan lineup, and Frontiers included.
Melaina, you said something interesting about it's part of a portfolio. How does this vehicle fit into the portfolio, and what kind of, as you're developing it, how do you look at the other vehicles, and how do you figure out where to place this in terms of fuel economy?
So it's based on sales volume, and I know I'm a little biased, but I tend to believe that this vehicle is going to sell very well. I think this vehicle is going to outsell the previous model and even what our predictions are. So something like that would put us into a little bit more of a discussion about emissions and CAFE and regulations, right? But when you look at it as a portfolio, you look at what vehicles fit where in terms of volume, and how do you meet your overall, how does Nissan meet their overall emissions and CAFE requirements? Now, as soon as you oversell your volume, which I firmly believe we're going to, that's where you run into some of those discussions of, okay, what do you do with your other models, right? And we still carry quite a few models with the V8 in it, which the V8 also is on that top tier of not great for emissions and fuel and regulatory, right? So it's looked at kind of overall, and we have a team in Nashville that looks specifically at that and the ever-changing government requirements and what's coming up and how do we need to react quickly. But we have that already in development, which really helps us. We have those alternatives already in development.
Melaina, we got another question here from our work. He says he's reading that the Frontier has been mechanically improved. So he's asking, is this just a new body and interior on the old truck? Or is there a lot more different than the old one?
A lot more. So I mentioned it at the beginning. So one of the things that we tried to do was not reinvent the wheel. So when we looked at our frame and our fundamental chassis layout, the frame we've had for 15 years, a frame that is proven to be very durable and reliable. So instead of designing a new frame, we started with that as kind of our framework of developing the truck. And then we built it from there. We knew we had to make significant improvements to the frame for safety requirements. So we started with that. We knew we had to change the chassis. We had to change the layout. We added hydraulic cab mounts, urethane jounce bumpers, a rear stabilizer bar. All of that required a chassis layout change, which required changes to the frame. So we started with the foundation of the old vehicle, but drastically changed from there, including NVH. So our NVH performance, not just wind noise and road noise, but how does all of that get into the cabin needed to be changed. It starts with the frame. So when you look at the vehicle, yes, of course, the styling's all new, but the only thing that we started with was the foundation of the frame, but it's significantly modified and our suspension is all new.
Mm-hmm. So did you make material changes to the structure or process changes? I mean, bolts or welds or other aspects.
So it was pretty drastic. It was cross member changes, stiffening side cross members, moving cross members. That was a lot of that was for safety. And then the rear suspension, adding a rear stabilizer bar, had to move things around, had to add brackets, add more clearance for the rear stabilizer bar. So a lot of that is redesigned. It's structure related changes. And then the suspension, we still have a leaf spring suspension, so that foundation is the same as the previous model, but the leaf springs are all new, so brand new tooled leaf springs, because the tuning had to be redone to match the new suspension. So again, I kind of like to say the foundation is the same, but drastically changed, meaning new tools, new parts, new materials, and new structure.
the idea is the same, but the execution is entirely different. So if somebody's
Yes.
hearing this, I mean, I think they need to understand that they just didn't take the old frame and say, "Oh, let's put some brackets on there. That's fine."
Right. Absolutely not.
This, Gary, is the difference between an engineering person answering this question and a marketing person answering it. The engineer explains the changes. The marketing person says, "It's all new."
Yes.
Sorry.
Melaina, I'm glad you mentioned those hydro mounts that you got between the frame and the cab, because one of the things that really stood out for me in driving this truck was its on-road manners. You know, as I talked about, I drove it up those rocky mountain roads. I towed, it was over 5,000 pounds on a trailer and the like, but man, did that thing ride smooth. So go into a little bit more of exactly how you got it to have such exemplary road manners.
So one of the things that my team does is we set the subjective targets for the performance teams to try to meet, and we set very aggressive targets that there was a lot of doubt on whether it was actually technically feasible. And one of the things that we really challenged our chassis team and our NVH team to do was to get as close to the ridge line as possible for ride comfort. We want it to ride as comfortable as a unibody vehicle. And you can imagine the engineering world came back and said, no, it's a body on frame vehicle. That's not possible. And our kind of stance was try. Tell us what you need, time, cost, resources. What do you need to do that? And our chassis dynamics team and our chassis design team delivered it. And I remember the first time I drove it when we first got vehicles, and it was last March 2020. And it wasn't tuned or anything, but we were blown away. We were blown away by the road isolation, that you don't feel every crack in the road. It isn't like a typical body on frame vehicle. And I remember going to the chassis dynamics team and saying, you're going to go tune now, but you're going to hit this out of the park. You're going to do exactly what we wanted to do. And it was really refreshing to hear that feedback during the media drive, that so many people recognized that we essentially delivered a unibody ride comfort level in this body on frame truck. So it took a lot of tuning, and our chassis team did a great job, but ultimately we challenged that and kind of weren't okay with just the answer of it's not technically feasible. That was not an acceptable answer to us.
So when you talk about comfort, it seems to me that another aspect of that is inside the cabin in terms of the amenities that you offer. Now, I mean, so starting, 15 years ago, if you were to say to somebody, satellite radio, they'd say, "What are you talking about? This is insane." So talk to us a little bit about, what you've put in that cabin in terms of some of the technologies for infotainment and whatnot.
So we wanted to make sure that our vehicle was usable. I'm not sure if you guys share the same opinion, but I know I get in a lot of vehicles today that have a lot of, and I get to sit in a lot of competitors, so I go from vehicle to vehicle, but they have a lot of technology, which is fantastic, but they're not easy to use. And so one of the feedback that we heard when we were developing Titan was that they wanted something that was easy to use. You're towing a boat, you've got, stuff in your bed. You want to make sure you don't have a lot of time with eyes off the road. So we wanted to make sure everything was in reach of the driver that they needed to use while driving. And we wanted to make sure our audio IT system was easy to use. So again, we didn't develop our audio IT system from the ground up. We took something that we knew was good and we, tuned it or honed in on it for Frontier. We added Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which was a huge want from the customer. Wireless charging that's really easy for you to still be able to access your phone. It's right in front of the center console. We added the USBs in the very front of the center console again, so it's very easy for you to just plug in when you're driving, when you need to. We also increased our storage big time. Storage was something. Cups. People have 6 or 7 things that they bring into their vehicle, right? So we wanted to make sure we had plenty of cup holders that were big enough for large, Yeti size cups or 32 ounce Gatorades. And we wanted to make sure we had enough storage, both uncovered and covered, for people to put everything they possibly need. 15 years ago, people didn't have cell phones they needed to take out of their pocket, right? They maybe just had a wallet. Now you've got a million things in your pocket that you need to put all over. So we made sure that the layout and the storage in the interior was exactly where everything needed to be. And it was intuitive. Where do you put your phone? Where do you put your wallet? We have all these little places for small storage within the center console area.
15 years ago, the cell phone was the size of a loaf of bread. So it was.
It was a car phone. So
Yes.
that just, just sat right there.
We're going to have to wrap this up, but I want to squeeze in one last question because several of our viewers are asking about this. Ronald and Big Barney want to know, why didn't you make it an electric truck?
I think the electric pickup truck market is still evolving. I think it's a very exciting time for electric pickup trucks. There's a lot of things to consider: towing, off-road, payload, all of those things. As I mentioned earlier, with the emissions and the CAFE requirements, Nissan is studying all of those options, not just for Frontier, but across our entire lineup. So I would say stay tuned. But at this point, we're studying it across our entire lineup.
Real good. Melaina, Vasko, you've been terrific to be on the show, and I am excited to see how the market receives this truck. I agree with you. I think it's going to do very, very well.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We're
Bye.
going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to be back talking about more things going on in the automotive industry.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what BorgWarner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
All right, we're back.
That was interesting to learn about the Frontier. I haven't had the opportunity to drive it yet. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I've said in the review that I did on the truck that Nissan's gone to the head of the class with this. And I really, truly believe that. And that's some formidable competition. Toyota Tacoma, which dominates the segment, GM and Ford threw their best at it. As I have told the Nissan people, it is the newest truck. It should be the best. I mean, that is the way it should happen. Doesn't always happen that way, but I believe they've got the best midsize truck out there right now.
Yeah, that segment is maybe not a huge segment, but there's a lot of fun stuff in there. And you even throw in the Gladiator to that mix, and there's some fun stuff and I think some real cool stuff coming as well. I don't know where you call it. The Rivian fits into that segment, maybe a little bigger, but it's sort of in that segment.
Well, what's been fascinating to me, Brett, is that midsize segment did not cannibalize the full-size segment. It just grew the whole pickup segment. Yeah. And I think that's going to happen with the Ford Maverick and the Hyundai Santa Cruz as well. I think they're going to not slice up the pie more thinly. I think they're going to bring more customers to the segment.
Yeah, those are two really interesting entries into the market. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch those and see the type of buyer that buys those. They're not going to be your traditional truck buyer by any stretch.
Right.
But
see, my question is there a traditional truck buyer in existence anymore?
Great point.
Great question. Point. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I just think that whole thing is just completely blown up, and it's a whole different thing. And so we're seeing people who never even thought about them as an option. And but I think that we're going to see some other changes, though. I mean, I especially with the availability of vehicles out there. I mean, and so one of the things that I'm beginning to think more and more about is that consumers may have to start buying vehicles that they don't necessarily want or desire. Maybe they want to get something new, and so if you go to a lot and a dealership, and the guy says, you know what, I've got this whole lineup of compact cars there. It very well may be because of the floor plan being so shrunk at dealerships now that people are going to start buying vehicles like that rather than full size or mid size pickup trucks.
Do you mean because of the chip shortage or because of the range of product?
I think mainly from the chip shortage and in the effects that COVID has had. That basically, I mean, companies don't have a whole lot of inventory, right? And so there are vehicles that people haven't purchased. Why haven't they purchased them? Because they wanted something else. Well, the something else may not be there. So, I mean, so what does that do in terms of the market? And I just wonder whether, we're going to see a resurgence in, say, sedan sales because there are availability of sedans in a way that there aren't crossovers or trucks.
I don't think there is inventory of sedans, though. And in fact, sales of sedans fell another 50,000 units last month. And the reason I say I don't think that there's inventory of them is because automakers are prioritizing high profit vehicles, which tend to be trucks and SUVs, not sedans.
Yeah, I agree with John. I think it's what is it? The Impala has not been in production for months and months and months.
Well, that was going away.
But those kind of decisions, I think you make what you're going to sell at a profit. And you're selling the trucks at a profit, so you're going to try to get your chips where possible into those trucks.
But Gary, you do raise a really good point. I mean, with inventory as tight as it is, customers just don't have the choice that they did a couple of years ago.
Right.
Hey, I wasn't kidding about being in the market for a truck, and it's hard to find one right now. It's really tricky. So this was a good sales pitch.
So you might, Brett, you may just end up with a Hyundai Accent. I mean, just because that'll be realistically available to you.
Absolutely possible, Gary. As everything's possible.
I was looking at into the whole chip thing, and I came upon a quote by this guy, Fallon Young, who is the director of industry statistics and economic policy for the Semiconductor Industry Association. So here's a guy who is very pro semiconductor, I'm sure, right? And he said, restoring market balance takes time. Semiconductor manufacturing is not suited to rapid and large shifts in demand since it takes time to ramp up semiconductor production. Making a semiconductor is one of the most complex manufacturing processes. Lead times of up to 26 weeks are the norm in the industry to produce a finished chip. Okay. And it just seems to me that hearing that guy from the Semiconductor Industry Association basically tells me that this thing ain't going to be over for quite a long time.
Yeah, I got to tell you too. There's a theory out there that the chip companies are deliberately holding back inventory to drive up prices. And I got to tell you, this isn't just some wacky social media kind of urban legend. I ran into a fairly well-known tier one supplier CEO yesterday who told me that's exactly what he believes is going on.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really, really important dynamics working. And one of them is the auto industry is realizing they're not the king of the block anymore. And they're not even close to being the king of the block anymore. And that's kind of a shock to a lot of us who think we're the kings of the blocks and the queens of the blocks. But no, there's others in the semiconductor world that pull rank quickly.
That's right.
Well, TSMC, who is the Taiwan semiconductor, that is one of the world's largest manufacturers of semiconductors, came out and said that they're going to raise their prices from 10 to 20%. So, I mean, what is the impact going to be to the non-king of the hill? I mean, is it going to make higher prices for cars and trucks?
I don't see how we don't come out of this with a higher short-term and mid-term price to pay for those. Just don't see how you're not going to get to the front of the line by saying we'll pay you less.
Yeah. That's right.
That's a good point. So J.D. Power came out with its 2021 U.S. initial quality study. And speaking of trucks, Ram, number one, and by a good measure in terms of problems per 100 vehicles, they had 128. Second place was Dodge at 139. You get to Lexus at 144, which is just amazingly tied with Mitsubishi at 144. But I mean, so Ram, 128 problems per 100 vehicles. Astounding.
Isn't that the great American comeback story? That's
I can't explain it. I mean, what do you guys think?
John?
Well, a couple of things to keep in mind is the longer you build a product, the better you get at it. All your manufacturing processes come into statistical control. You can get to Six Sigma. Same goes for your suppliers. Who's got the oldest lineup out there? Dodge and Mitsubishi. You're gonna say no. Okay, what?
Well, okay. So if we take that logic, then Chrysler ought to be doing very well, right? Because how long have they been building the 300C? Forever. Right? They are at the absolute bottom of the list.
Even below Tesla.
They're at 251. Okay.
And they only have two vehicles, right? The minivan and the 300.
Right.
So there's some big problem there.
Right. I mean, it's just.
And if Dodge is doing well with the Charger and Challenger, which are built in the same plant on the same chassis as the Chrysler 300, that tells me the problem's with the minivan. And so what is it?
So Gary and John, I'd come back to you with this. How many people really, really focus on IQS anymore? Just about every car out there is pretty darn good.
Right.
Is it? And I don't know this. I mean,
no, that's a great point. So this is measuring the first 90 days of ownership. Mm-hmm. And as I keep saying, look, everything should work for the first 90 days. You're talking 3 months. And so what did J.D. Power make a big deal out of in this initial quality survey? Pairing your phone. That was, I think they said that was the number one complaint. Well, big deal. We test drive all cars all the time. Some are very good at pairing phones. I think Hyundai's the best overall, up and down the lineup, I would say, in my experience. But what I'm getting at is, okay, maybe it's a hassle, but when you get it paired, it's paired. You never go back to it again. And so maybe that's your number one complaint in the first 90 days. I think, J.D. Power is scrambling to find some sort of defect, quote unquote defect, to talk about. I don't think any of these things are a big deal.
I go back many, many years ago when we used to see that data, and Toyota would have one or two defects per 100, and some of the domestics would have 6, 7, 8 defects per 100. That was a difference, a real difference that you could see and tell and feel. And nowadays, again, you both of you drive everything on the road. There aren't very many bad products. There's a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of bad products, but I think what there is some very extraordinary products. Okay, you see some of these things. I mean, like John, you mentioned Genesis. I mean, it's just like those guys are doing a fabulous job, and I just was recently in the GV70, and it's just like, wow, this is astonishing. And if I were a product planner at one of the other car companies, I would be looking for work because they did such a great job. Okay, and so good isn't good enough anymore. Okay, and it's got to be special. And I would give it up to the guys at Ram. I mean, you go into the interior of their vehicles, it's just like you say, wow. I mean, you just can't help yourself because it's just like, this is the inside of a truck. They've done this. And, and so it's like lots of car companies. Yeah, they make good products, but it's got to be more than that. It's got to be something special. And I think that, whether JD Power is finding out something or not, or whether it's tangible. Okay. So I'm looking at their midsize pickup. Okay. For you, Brett, I'm looking for the midsize pickups. Okay. So the highest ranked is the Jeep Gladiator. Okay. Then it's the Ranger. Then it's the Colorado. Okay. So as a customer, and if you went into a Jeep dealer to look at the Gladiator and the guy says to you, well, look, this ranked number 1 in IQS, you're going to take notice of that. Whether that is going to have anything to do with what you're looking for in terms of performance of the vehicle, maybe you're looking for payload capacity or whatever it is. You're going to say, oh, I'm going to think about that, and
Must be a good
especially,
car.
and
I'll have
especially
to go look at that truck.
and especially someone who isn't in the industry is going to say, "Wow, that's quite interesting. I've got to pay a little more attention to that." Or is that just me?
I do think it doesn't carry the cachet it used to, but obviously people still look at it.
So you think it used to be more important and it's less so now?
I do believe that.
And why would that be?
I think partly because there's so much other information available. Pre-web, you could only get so much information, and they were very good at marketing the JD Power difference. And I think it's also, Gary, you're right. There are some that really distinguish themselves, but there are just a lot of really, really well-built, good quality cars out there. And people know that, I think. Yes, you're going to run into cars that aren't great, but most are really good.
Yeah, I would say the big difference is the quality gap has closed. Toyota and Honda, they used to be way out in front of everybody else. They're not anymore. And in fact, now with so much emphasis being paid to connectivity and infotainment interface, they're worse. I mean, they're not good, as good as others that are out there. And so I think it was great headlines to say in the past, Americans make junk, the Japanese make the best. And that's controversial. That makes headlines. And now when you say Ram and Dodge are above everybody else, it's like nobody cares.
But Gary, going back to your interiors, it was remarkable what splashes Ram made when they put that big screen in that Ram pickup truck. It was just phenomenal, the difference that made in that whole segment.
Right. And, and I think that, the interior space is so very important now because people, spend, with COVID, they spend less time in their car, but, or maybe they spend more time in their cars. They don't want to get out of their cars. But, John says, you pair your phone and it's paired, but there are other issues that you've got to take into account that, it wasn't just all of that. If knobs are difficult to reach, or if there are no knobs, and if the slider doesn't work very well, and so you have all these elements, or the seat isn't very comfortable, or the armrest is in an awkward position. There's just lots of little elements. And, I just think that it's, it's good for the domestics to be able to say, okay, so, Chevy finished with 151 points. Toyota had 156. So you go to your Chevy dealer and the guy's going to be able to say, you know what? This Chevy scores better than a Toyota. Oh, right. It's unfathomable. And then I look at some of these that are at the bottom of the list. If the industry average is 162. Lincoln, Porsche, GMC, Honda, Jaguar, BMW, Infiniti, Cadillac, Mazda, Subaru, Mercedes, Acura, Land Rover, Alfa, Volvo, Volkswagen, Audi, Chrysler, all below industry average. Okay, so yes, cars are better, but some, it's not like Lake Wobegon, where everyone's above average. There are some that are below. You like that, didn't you, Brad? How I worked that in there.
Really old school. I like that.
It is, very home.
But I was going to go back. You've mentioned Dodge and Ram. I think it's an interesting story as well to see who's at the bottom there. Both of the Volkswagen brands were way down that list, which is, they've struggled now and then, but they're pretty far down that list. If you're right and it makes a difference, that's a big story there as well. Yeah,
I think so. John disagrees with the whole thing, though.
I'm with John.
Okay, S. Maltea says he thinks that the phone pairing defect is that the fact that the car has to be repaired, or the phone has to be repaired time and again. I've never encountered that in a car. I don't know how many cars I drive a year, 60, 70, 80 cars a year. Once I get the phone paired, it's paired.
My older car, I have that problem every time I get in the car.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it was, and this was an update fixed by the car company. It was working wonderful until they updated it, and so yes, it is a problem. It's frustrating, but it's for a manufacturing company. like Toyota, to hear, well, the reason your car got dinged was because you couldn't pair your phone, but it's built so well.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean that raises a question. I mean, so as the market shifts, I mean, what is more important to a consumer today? Is it the reliability of the car, that it starts every time you get out there and it takes you to where you need to get to and it takes you back reliably, or does somebody say, "Oh crap, it doesn't have CarPlay, I don't want it"?
The latter.
Yeah, because today a reliable car is a given.
Yep. That
I
goes
mean,
back
they
to our
start up every time.
that goes back to our 8 defects versus 2 defects, and now they're 1 defect difference kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're all good. Gary, your point, the great ones stand out.
Well,
Kind of like journalists, right, Gary?
I wouldn't know, Brett. All right, so okay, moving on to a completely different subject. Okay, so there's a company called Motional, and Motional is a joint venture between Aptiv, the company that is involved very deeply and heavily into making autonomous technology, and Hyundai. And so they formed in 2020 to develop autonomous driving capability. They announced that they've developed the IONIQ 5 Robotaxi, which will be a level 4 SAE system. And now the IONIQ 5 has been introduced, but it isn't really out yet. I mean, none of us have seen it in person or driven it, and but it's a very cool looking electric crossover vehicle. So what I find interesting is that, so there's always been this thought of, okay, you see those cars driving around and they have those Kentucky Fried Chicken buckets on their roofs that are spinning, and all these sensors. It's like, oh, we can't have that. Well, these guys are taking a different point of view. First of all, again, beautiful vehicle, and they're saying, you know what? We're going to make the cameras and the LiDARs and the radars, we're going to make them obvious. We're going to make them apparent. So people are going to know that this is a robo-taxi and not something else. And, they're saying that they're going to start a driverless shuttle service in 2023 using Lyft. Okay, so right now, Motional is working with Lyft in Las Vegas, and they're doing, there's a safety driver involved, but autonomous driving. I think this may be the real deal. I think this may be the one that has the breakthrough. What do you guys think?
I have a couple of comments. First, in the press release, I guess it came out this week, as they're releasing it in Munich, I think, or talking about it in Munich. It said Motional is a joint venture between South Korean-based Hyundai and Ireland-based Aptiv. And it is so strange to Ireland-based Aptiv. But Aptiv has been doing some driverless stuff, or some testing in Vegas for several years now, a couple of years maybe. So not surprising that they're going to do this in Vegas. And looking at the vehicle again, minimal understanding or visibility into what their system is. It's the next generation, but I don't think it's the generation by any stretch.
Yeah, I got a couple of observations. Remember, Aptiv is the spinoff from Delphi. Delphi, I mean, I want to say it was 6 years ago or so, they claimed to be the first company to drive an autonomous car across the U.S., coast to coast. So they got a lot of autonomous experience. They've been at this a long time. But, the really high-tech growth stuff got carved out of Delphi and spun off as Aptiv. The reason that it says Ireland-based, that's just for tax purposes.
I know.
They're not doing any of the engineering or any of that stuff over in Ireland. I can assure you that.
I know that,
Yeah.
but it's just weird to see that.
I know it is weird, and frankly, it pisses me off, these companies that, will beat their chest and say how, honorable they are to the United States, but the first chance they get, they go to some tax haven offshore so they don't have to pay taxes here. But if any problem happens, they're going to expect, emergency responders and all these other tax-based organizations to come help rescue them if there's a fire or a flood or a hurricane or anything like that. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, only to say that, I'll bet on Hyundai with Aptiv are going to be very serious players in the autonomous arena.
Okay. So let's quantify that a little bit. Are they going to be ahead of Waymo? Are they going to be ahead of Cruise? Are they going to be ahead of Argo AI? As car companies, are they going to be ahead of General Motors? Are they going to be ahead of Ford? Are they going to be ahead of Toyota?
Well, Waymo, I think Waymo's lost its way. Waymo has not commercialized its technology. And they, even though they're modifying Chrysler minivans and Jaguars, they really don't have an automotive partner that is going to do the heavy lifting of getting into a robotaxi service. GM Cruise, they're with GM. My perception is they're the leaders right now. Argo is hitched up with Ford and Volkswagen. That's a really powerful 1-2 combination. And now Aptiv is hooked up with Hyundai. I think that's going to be the answer to all this autonomy. As a tech company, you're going to have to be hooked up with an automaker. As an automaker, you're going to have to be hooked up with a tech company.
So I would get Gary, an associate of mine, Eric Paul Dennis, for about 7 years now, has done a great job of tracking promises made and promises broken, is what I refer to it as. But as he looked over since 2015, maybe all of the promises made about delivering these level 4, level 5 technologies to the road. And inevitably, when they arrive, they tend to be grayed out. And, and by grayed out, I mean on the slide, they fade away. The realization is a couple of things. One, it's really, really, really hard to do this. It's not as easy as the Silicon Valley wanted us to believe 7 or 8 years ago. The other is that people are there's a lot happening there. But to John's point, it seems as though now the lines have been drawn, the partnerships have been made, the investment, the startup space is still there, but it's going to be a whole lot tougher for someone that isn't one of these big companies to get there, wherever the heck there is.
One of the things I wonder about is that, okay, if you look at Argo AI, so you have this company and they hook up with Ford and they hook up with Volkswagen, but they're basically a tech company, right? That's where their starting was. Then you look at Aptiv, and John, as you mentioned, that was a part of Delphi. Delphi had been part of General Motors. Delphi was a supplier company, right? So Aptiv's core comes from the automotive supply base, and then they acquired tech companies, and so that they brought the knowledge that they had as a supplier and have adapted it as a tech company, and now they're working with an OEM. I sort of think that this might be the advantageous way to go. I mean, to hook up with a supplier that has experience. So whether and it could be a Bosch, it could be a Conti, something like that, because they have an understanding of what's needed, and they can buy the technology smarts. You're laughing, Brett. I can see that.
Yes, I am, because 3 years ago we all were saying the exact opposite. Boy,
not
not you, because you were always the thought leader. We know that, but so much of the thought leadership of the time was, these suppliers better find a great tech partner because they're going to be left behind and they're not going to be needed in the future. And I think that story, I think, is coming to full or half circle, I guess, back to where, yes, you're right. You have to be able to do the manufacturing and the implementation. And that, again, is really hard stuff.
Mm-hmm. And John, you were saying, because Waymo doesn't really have an OEM partner, and so you can have all of the smarts, but you need the mechanical ability, as it were, to deploy that in a useful way. And yes, that they're in Chandler, Arizona, rolling around in Pacificas and Jaguars, and they're going to do it in San Francisco. But to make this scale, to make this real, to make this something that is going to be more than a one-off or a like, oh gee whiz, look at that, isn't that an autonomous car that's going down the street there? Which I did see in Austin, by the way, which is an Argo AI car that I saw a couple of times. And but to get it from being a novelty to a reality, I think, is what maybe Motional is going to do.
So if we have a moment, let me take this to electric vehicles for a minute, because the same discussion seems to be happening in electric vehicles. As we see companies like Foxconn, who's a technology company, talking about building electric vehicles. There's this, and Foxconn builds a lot of automotive parts in China anyways, but there's this question of who wins the future. Is it the traditional manufacturers or Magna? Or is it these laptop companies, because an electric vehicle is sort of like a rolling iPhone or a rolling laptop? And right now there seems to be a whole lot of momentum and enthusiasm around the small startups that are more tech than auto. But does that come back around, Gary and John, to what you're talking about now for AVs? Do you at some point have to build these things in volume and that comes back to good old automotive folks? Or is it a real paradigm shift?
I think
John?
it comes back to traditional automaking, to be able to procure thousands of parts from all over the world, bring them to the right point at the assembly line, and assemble them, and do that 60 an hour all year long, and come out with great quality, so that you're at the top of the JD Power IQS at least, or maybe the vehicle dependable survey later on.
Yeah, that one.
And yeah, look, Foxconn's got a lot of manufacturing prowess, a lot of experience. That's going to help it. However, automotive is, an iPhone times 100 in terms of size and complexity. So just because they've got that experience doesn't mean it's automatically going to translate into them flicking the switch and rolling about at 60 an hour.
But it does seem that it can be the case that you could be a Foxconn and work with Magna, and not an automaker, but working with a company that has the wherewithal to do this stuff and completely understands it from soup to nuts. And that may be the alternative way to go for some of these companies. And I think that we're seeing that, like Fisker is, very, very well enmeshed with what Magna's capabilities are. And I think that's going to be a great idea for those guys.
Well, Magna sees Foxconn as a competitor. In this day and age, there's a lot of co-opetition, right? I'll cooperate and I'll compete at the same time, me versus me. But remember, we talked to Swami Kotagiri recently on the TV show, and he said, I don't think we're going to build a new plant in the U.S. or North America. There's too much excess capacity already. And so, we might build a plant right now because it makes sense in this snapshot in time. But as we look down the road with too much excess capacity, it could prove to be a really bad investment decision.
It has been interesting to see how Magna Steyr, the vehicle building part of the business, for 10, 15 years was kind of forgotten about. People knew about them. They did some work in Graz, but they seem to be a really hot entity right now. A lot of interest from those startups that you talk about, John, a lot of interest in Asia, and they do have remarkable engineering and manufacturing chops.
They do. And Magna did open a new assembly plant in China. And to your point, Brett, whether it's traditional OEMs seeing a niche market for something like a BMW Z4 or a Toyota Supra or a Mercedes G-Wagon, they'll push that off to Magna to do. And the startups are interested in a Magna or any other kind of contract manufacturer because they don't know anything about making cars. And, they saw the struggles that Tesla went through. And number one, they don't want to make the investment, the billions of investment in having their own plants. And then secondly, B, why not go to somebody who's got the experience in doing this?
It's going to be an interesting situation to watch. And so, okay, good. That's my list. So,
well, Brett, thanks so much for coming on the show. Great having you here.
Thanks so much. It's so good to see both of you all the time. It's great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
That's great.
See each other live one of these days.
Gary, I'm glad you made it back in for the show today.
Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it for the world.
Okay. See y'all later.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.